everybody. Beau Billington with the Free Agent Podcast. Super pumped. I've got Jeff Roberts. Jeff, thanks for joining.
Happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Beau.
Yeah, so super excited about today's topic, which is all things AI, but a high-level view of AI. So a bit of a remedial course for maybe some of the practitioners out there, but I think it's really topical and very much needed. Prior to doing so you're founder of Innovation Vista, an IT consultancy providing tech strategy and leadership services to small and mid-sized organizations on a contract basis. So what do you guys actually, what does that mean actually, Jeff? So what do you do?
So we have a team of over 400 consultants.
Mhm.
These are former CIOs, CTOs, Chief Information Security Officers, C-level IT leaders, basically, that have now pivoted in their career to consulting. So they've succeeded at that C-suite level,
Mhm.
now offering those services on a contract basis. And we place them with generally mid-sized companies, some small as well,
Mhm.
where they're either feeling pain with their IT
Sure.
or they need help determining how IT can really make a difference in the organization's results. Market share, revenue, efficiencies, obviously a
Right.
huge topic for IT, improving margin, things of that nature. So that's what we do. It's all sort of isolated and focused on that C level of service. So
Mhm.
that means we don't do tech support. We don't do system hosting. We don't do custom software programming. Just that strategy, guidance, and leadership.
Got it. So it could be maybe CIO seat, essentially fractional CIO, if you will, or
Do a
anything.
lot of that, fractional and virtual, interim CIO, assessments, roadmaps, strategic planning, digital transformation planning, and topical for today, we help companies start their AI programs or enhance them.
So I think that's obviously a great segue into today's conversation, and we get connected in regards to AI. And so, first question out of the gate, how long have you been around AI? And obviously, AI hasn't been around that long. But talk to us a little bit about kind of your experience and exposure to date.
Yeah, so I actually first touched AI in my last tenure as a CIO, which is, I guess, beginning in 2016.
Mhm.
So 8 years is the short answer. I've been around it. At that point, there was no Chat GPT, there were no Gemini. We custom developed machine learning models, several models, and two natural language processing models for the commercial real estate company that I was leading the IT for. Had a lot of success with that. Really saw the power of that. And as it happens, that company was acquired 3 years later, 2019,
Oh,
by a large competitor. And part of what they were interested in moving over is all the work we had done in AI, which at that point had driven something like 400% ROI on
wow.
the investment. Yeah, really, really impactful.
Hmm.
Um, in some cases, it was doing some things that replaced human effort, connecting the dots of data, predicting counterparty levels of interest on different transactions, things like that. Um, the natural language processing was taking meeting notes and phone call notes and turning that into usable data in our system relative to preferences, decisions, suggestions for future transactions. So all of that was, I just was very intrigued. There's a lot that I love about IT, and we do other things at Innovation Vista besides AI, all the way across the spectrum. But I will say that experience with AI and the work I've done since, and our consultants have done, really is the most exciting thing to me on the horizon
Sure.
for new and interesting innovation that really will impact the marketplace, and it's going to impact a lot of people's lives and a lot of companies, obviously.
Yeah, it's super interesting. It sounds like you definitely were on the cutting edge. And now, in 2024, there's AI meeting notes. It's really common to get, summary of the discussion where they kind of pull out the high points. And of course,
Yeah.
ChatGPT, which you referred to earlier, is pretty prevalent these days. I even use it from time to time, and it's really interesting the parallels that it can make from like two things that maybe a human would deem as uncommon, and they can really just make some interesting connections. But jumping into this a little bit deeper, so in your definition, what is artificial intelligence? I'd like to start there, and I've got a follow-up question to that. And
Yeah.
again, this seems so remedial, but I feel like this is really where we need to start because everybody's freaking out about artificial intelligence and what it can be, what it cannot. Skynet about to come online. But talk to us
Yeah.
a little bit about your definition of what AI is for.
Yeah, that's great. At the basic level, AI is math applied to data sets, um, probabilities. It's pattern matching of data. So typically with an AI model, you are training it with a certain data set, and using that training to then get predictions from that model on real world examples where those predictions are useful and actually predicting the future, or they are, in the case of ChatGPT and the large language models, they are predicting what words and phrases will make sense given the context and given the pattern that's
Mhm.
being asked for. That's really what those models do. So it's math. And so it what it does is it breaks down these training data sets into data patterns, combinations. Think of it maybe like a DNA chain. What genes are in place for certain combinations, and how do those go together? Some of the earliest AI that most of us saw as consumers was on Amazon. And people who bought this item frequently bought
Yeah.
this other item as well, right? That kind of model. How does it do that? Well, it does that by looking at sort of the data pattern of the thing you're buying, and the combinations of other people who bought things, not just that one thing, but similar things. What other similar things did they often buy? And what's the most prevalent combination for a basket of goods? That's really math. And just to keep the definition somewhat short, I'll leave it with that. Math applied to data sets.
No, I love it. I wrote down predictions and insights, but then
Yeah.
also chatbots. I would imagine, in addition to kind of like, users who bought this also bought this, chatbots was probably like, phase 2.0, and the
Yeah,
AI
it's
evolution.
applying the same thing to words and phrases. And the more advanced it gets, even sort of paragraphs and concepts. There's multiple layers of these models now that it sort of determines, what do I do? Okay, what are the components of that? What are the most likely pieces that form that component? What are the most likely words that should form that piece? And it breaks it down and forms its responses in that way.
Understood. Now, Jeff, so another question I think is really important for the listeners is AI, so artificial intelligence versus ML or machine learning. I feel like those terms are used interchangeably. Candidly, I don't know if they should be or if they shouldn't be, but if you can demystify maybe the two terms and how they're different, that would be of interest.
Yeah, they are often mixed up. I think of them as in a Venn diagram. Artificial intelligence is the wide circle. Machine learning is a very large circle within that. And I say large because machine learning has proven to be the most effective model for artificial intelligence, or framework.
So
And
ML is a subset of AI or a
it
framework
is.
of AI.
Yeah, yeah. So, we in the common usage now, the way machine learning has been come to be used is as distinguished from vision, AI, sort of pattern matching, self-driving cars, things of that nature. And then the large language models, right? So machine learning is used on all of that, but I find my colleagues and I use the term machine learning when we are talking about a traditional AI model, like what I was building and designing back in 2016 through call it 2020,
Okay.
where it is strictly math and data. It's not looking at vision output. It's not looking at English language or any language as output. It is strictly data points, uh, more of a sort of a layer on top of a relational database.
I really appreciate that
I don't
definition.
know if I cleared that up at all.
No,
It
no,
is
you
confusing
did.
because it's an underlying sort of capability that makes all of AI go.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it's definitely nuanced, but it does make sense. And
yeah,
I did not realize that it was a subset of AI, which is super interesting. It's just
yeah,
data only versus, to your point, the vision component, the language component.
yeah,
So wow, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, even a fifth grader, I'm sure, could understand that, which is great. So we talked about a few use cases earlier, the Amazon use case, chatbots, et cetera. How are companies, really leveraging AI or ML in 2024?
yeah. So I guess at the high level, there is there's generative AI,
Mhm.
which creates things, and there's descriptive AI, which classifies things or describes things. And The generative AI is easily the 90% of the interest right now. There's still some really interesting use cases actually on just descriptive AI
Yep.
classifying things. You know, Companies use it for, like I said earlier, replacing human effort. So if someone is going through a predictable process, looking at data, trying to find,
Mhm.
um, an interesting combination. Think about a stockbroker who is crawling through a list of stocks, trying to find ones with a certain pattern because they have a client that has some money that they want to put to work in the
Mhm.
market. That's a good use case, right? And so an AI model that sits on top of that would replace what the broker used to do or augment it,
Yeah.
trying to find those patterns that would match what that investor has done in the past or has expressed an interest in investing in today. Um, Companies use it to really go beyond what humans can do as well. So it's interesting. Um, People don't think about this as much, but AI can do just impossible things, things that are impossible for humans
Mhm.
to do. Crawl through a million lines of code. So let's say it's not stocks, it's every book that's ever been published. So some incredible listing like
Sure.
that. Really, with today's processing and the horsepower that NVIDIA and others are bringing to the table for this, that's no real challenge for an AI model
Right.
to make predictions about the most interesting books that someone might be interested in. And there are cases like that. The Goodreads app does exactly that. And based on how you have rated other books, again, that sort of looking at the DNA of those, it looks at what other books have similar DNA that you probably would like as well, and it recommends those to you. Um, there's a lot of efficiencies companies try to look for, obviously. The customer service area has been an interesting topic for us lately. So chatbots, you see a lot of this taking over the first line of contact with a
Mhm.
customer. So they hit your website and they have a question, or they call into the IVR and they have a question. AI it is trained on sort of the basic answers, the basic questions, and what are the answers to those. It can handle a lot. It can't handle everything, but it can handle a lot of those common questions, and then it can detect if someone is irritated or if they just directly say, I need to talk to a representative. Get me a human being on the phone because I have a complicated question, something like that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I've also heard a lot about the chatbots going rogue, where there's poor data that's being input chatbots, and then saying something to the effect with a much worse word, but what a stupid question or something that very, very cheeky
Yes.
back to the customer, which is very funny, but obviously from an outsider it's funny. But if that's your business, there's some.
uh, it's reputation damage, right? Very, very damaging. And I'm glad you mentioned that because, garbage in, garbage out has been a cliche since the 60s with computers. And it's never been more true. And particularly with AI that is, I'm going to say, cut free to interact directly with
Right.
the public. Some AI is more behind the scenes and it's used for first drafts or things like that. If it's facing directly to the public, you really run the risk unless you have scrubbed your training data sets. You know what's gone into that, and you are very comfortable that uh, it's not sort of slanted.
Right.
It's not prejudice. And what I mean by that is in the sense of prejudging. It's not sort of limited to a certain demographic, a certain kind of customer, a certain kind of question, that it will cover the full gamut of your customer base and treat them all fairly and correctly. So yeah, some companies have learned the hard way. We're still very early stage here. I will say we're going to see more of that. There are more and more companies that are doing things with AI directly facing to customers because they've gained some confidence, I guess. They've gone through testing and they feel like the quality is there. That quality might be there. Let's think about 99.9%.
Yeah.
It sounds fantastic, right? I mean, it's wow, you would probably trust that. Um, but that means 1 in 1,000 callers or customers are going to have some kind of inaccuracy or maybe a very embarrassing sort of interaction
Right.
with the AI. And for some companies, 1 in 1,000 is far too many.
No, I
So
mean,
yeah,
right? I mean, they've got, millions of customers, and that's going to be, I don't know how, I can't do
yeah,
the head right now, but that's how many, how many each day that are getting a poor
yeah.
experience.
So you have to get it to that 100.0%, which is incredibly challenging. What we do a lot of our work, being sort of on the strategy side, and the initial leadership of AI programs, is helping companies determine what sort of use cases make sense, what's possible, what's impactful, what's the best path to get there, and really sort of how should they use their money in AI. And because a lot of companies really want to do something, or their boards of directors or CEOs have decided we're going to do something, uh, in some cases just to do it because everyone else is doing it. They don't want to be left behind. They want to start learning those lessons. In some cases, they have an idea of what they want to do, but they're not sure the best path. And at that level, we recommend a lot of sort of human in the loop, it's called, where your AI is limited. It's put behind a wall, so to speak, and it's delivering first draft kinds of responses that a person is going to look at and say, I'm totally comfortable with this, pass it on, or not. I need to wordsmith this a little bit, or something along that line. That's a much easier level to get to in terms of accuracy and reliability.
Sense.
So that's often where we start.
Yeah, I mean, definitely sounds like it's got to be an iterative process. You can't just assume the data set's clean and put it
Yeah.
out. Yet. I think that's a good segue into like ethical impacts of AI, potential risks. I mean, we've covered some of those, which again, having poor data, particularly if it's customer. Facing. But what are some other ethical impacts or risks that companies should look out for?
Yeah, I think the prejudice is probably the number one on everyone's mind right now because if you have a customer base that is very diverse,
Mhm.
you are by nature you're going to have some that have lots and lots of customers, and you're going to have some sort of categories of people that they're not very many. There's only a few, and the risk in those situations is that if they need different care, let's think about a hospital setting now. If they need different care because of the unique nature of the category that they are in, and that model only sees this little bit. Remember, it's math.
Right.
So if it's looking at the pattern as a whole and it sees a vast majority of people over here with this symptom, here's what they need. Well, there's this unique little sliver that because of their condition, that treatment is not only wrong, it could be dangerous or life-threatening in some cases. And so, that sort of awareness, structuring the training data sets, structuring the decision model where you take away some of those risks, that is real rocket science. And so that's where a lot of effort is being applied right now. Not only commercially, in companies and in the healthcare industry, certainly there's a lot of work, but at the university level, there are a lot of research efforts underway to really think about this theoretically on how do you know when you've got one of these sort of situations in hand. Of course, other other ethical considerations are copyright infringement. The training data sets that pull in data from the internet sometimes include copyrighted material. Authors, in particular, I'll point to that group. They are, I would say, up in arms right now because their books and their articles and their work have been used as training for a lot of these AI models. And when people are asking for a new piece of work in the generative AI space, it's using those artists' work as fodder, if you will, as input for what it comes up with. And there are a lot of output that has sort of gone public with this, that they look a lot like a particular writer or painter or um, video producer, right? Even music is being created now with generative AI. And depending on your prompt instructions and what you tell it that, what do you want it to look at and what sort of patterns do you want to create? Um, if there are very few examples or if it's a very specific request, the likelihood gets raised that what it comes out with is going to look like a particular person's work. That is just an enormous challenge. And the idea of tagging data that is copyrighted or intellectual property in some sense, there's a lot of that out in the public. And we all understand when we see something that you watch a movie, you understand someone made that movie, they own that movie. Um, it's very difficult in the world of AI to turn that into data
Right.
that is usable by a model to know if I create something, I need it to not look close enough to this. Or do we choose in some cases just not to put copyrighted material into training data sets at all? So a lot of debate right now on that front. If you go to AI conferences, there's a whole line of I guess debate and inquiry on just this topic. When people own their output,
Right.
what do we do?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I've got a fractional business myself, and I do a lot of content creation. I've leveraged ChatGPT a little bit, but I always had a concern. Where's this verbiage coming from? Is it somebody else's work? Is it not somebody else's work? But then more importantly, like, what's the source of truth? Like how do I know the information that is being sent back to me is actually validated somehow? And granted, of course, I read it, and then you have to agree or not or disagree, and change everything is it can still sound a bit robotic. But literally, I mean, if somebody input incorrect information into ChatGPT and somebody on the other end, asks a question, I mean, who's to say that it won't regurgitate this wrong information, right? So
Yeah.
misinformation, disinformation, I can see really being um, relatively prevalent now. But I mean, you look in the future, 3, 5 years, and I could see it being a real problem. And then it's like, how do you uncock that gun or put the genie back in the bottle? Insert, you
And
know,
we have a problem as a society, and that could probably be a topic for its own podcast or even its own series of podcasts. Honestly, it is fascinating. The courts are dealing with this question, both on the input side. Do you own the do you own it if an AI model generates the content, right? Do you have a copyright claim on that sort of content? And the courts initially said no, and now they've come and said, well, if it's being used as a tool,
right,
there are other tools. There's a legal precedent for tool software being used to create content that is still copyrightable. I mean, that's been the case for decades. And so now it's come down to this sort of how much did AI contribute versus streamline.
right, and
And you mentioned bad data in is certainly a risk, the garbage in, garbage out problem, but it's not just that. The hallucinations problem is interesting because some very public embarrassing cases. I'm thinking about the attorney who used Chat GPT. This is probably 12 to 15 months ago. He used Chat GPT to file his brief at the court, and it was citing previous cases that did not exist. They had never existed. And you look on Westlaw or these other databases, it could find nothing
you didn't even
even
read.
close. And so it took names from here,
Uh,
dates from here, course docket numbers from here. And somehow, and this is obviously an earlier version that's there. I know it's better. Yeah, in the current versions of Grok and Gemini and Copilot and ChatGPT, they're all aware of this problem. They're all focused on getting it better, where data comes as a package, a cohesive set of things comes in, not, well, here, this piece of this piece of that, and you end up with this Frankenstein that's a court case that never happened, right? So it's interesting, and I'm fascinated by the whole landscape because I just think the potential for this is like nothing we've ever seen. Truly, it is another revolution, like the information revolution that computers brought to the table with general automation, having a system ledger to keep track of data, databases, etc. That was a revolution. This is just like that in my mind, in terms of the impact on society, in terms of really putting on autopilot a lot of what we decide and choose and implement on a daily basis.
right.
I think we're fast approaching a point where you will have a certain part of your life that is just sort of happening, right? The paying of bills. Okay, that's a good example. You get a bill, you pay it. You have a utility, you need to pay that bill. You have the money, you pay it, right? It's just the most rudimentary thing ever. It really doesn't even need AI ultimately to fulfill that function. Those kinds of things, there probably will be an AI that is responsible for paying bills, and you will set parameters and you will give it instructions. Hey, hold off everything until I get my paycheck on Friday, or let's send the minimum now. I'm trying to maximize what I put into savings for my Christmas fund or whatever. High level instructions like that will be enough for an AI to know how to treat your money. And so I think things like that, grocery shopping, a lot of the tedium that is in life that we spend a lot of mental energy doing, I think it's about to go on autopilot. And that's exciting from the perspective of what will we be freed up to do instead.
Well,
And I really think we're about to have an explosion of creativity, um, coming up with an idea, even using generative AI on the creative side, the way that it lets you play with a concept and then alter it. And, it's like nothing else. I saw a video the other day of a group that created a animated video of what looked like live puppies playing in the snow. Okay. That'd be incredibly difficult to film. You'd have to go to a certain place. You'd have to get a certain kind of weather. You'd have to get the puppies, obviously. You have to train them because it wanted them to do certain things. With AI, no problem.
right.
Uh, Put in the instructions. Here's what I want them to do. And I want one of them to flip another one on its back and playfully roll around in the snow. And I want another one to go over and do a snow angel. When could you have that done by a real life puppy? No. So, these kinds of things are becoming possible with just a few keystrokes. And yeah, it's an exciting time to be alive. It's an exciting time to be in IT consulting,
For sure.
especially.
Yeah, one last point, we'll tie that off. I've got one more questions for you, Jeff, and thanks for your time. But I will say there, I'm sure there are going to be some unintended consequences. Like as an example, I started leveraging ChatGPT to help with content creation, and after about 3, 4 weeks, I literally had writer's block like I have never experienced in my entire life. I couldn't figure
Wow.
what to write, how to write, like grammatical issues. It was very, very challenging to the point that I actually have stopped using ChatGPT all content creation
That's interesting.
because I created a real dependency and my creativity completely plummeted. And maybe
Huh.
I'm anomaly, I don't know, but it kind of woke me up a little bit. Maybe uh
That is interesting.
yeah, yeah. So something to think about. All right, last question for you. So if a company is considering AI, for their business implications, et cetera, where should they start? Should they find a fractional AI practitioner? Should they hire a consulting company? Should they go get Larry from the IT department to come in and sit down at the board? Like, where should somebody start? Because I feel a lot of folks have analysis paralysis where AI, don't know what it is. We need it. No idea where to start. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to.
Yeah. Yeah. We call it a solution in search of a problem in a lot of cases. So I appreciate the question. And obviously my answer is biased on this front, but um, put aside Innovation Vista for a second, right? Just in general, this is an area where expertise and track record are invaluable. You need to interact with someone who has done this successfully in the wild, in your industry, ideally, to understand the landscape of what's possible, what is expensive versus very doable, uh, to understand the landscape of data, to know how to sort of gauge the usability of the data that you have in your organization for AI use cases, and then to understand what's available in the market to enrich your data. Are there licensable data sets? Are there subscriptions? Is there government data? It's actually shocking to a lot of people that the Department of Commerce and other government entities put out an incredible amount of data. Actually, some of it is really, really good. And so just understanding all of that, right? So this is where a lot of clients do come to us with the question, how do we start?
Right.
Our board has said we've got to do AI. We just heard that our competitor down the street has got 3 data scientists, and they're obviously doing something, and we don't want to be caught flat-footed. The process really is important, and having someone that knows what they're talking about and can guide an organization is important. I would say this is an area where you do not Google the answer.
Agree.
There's so much hype and really overhype and unbelievable claims and really fraudulent claims out there. You need to check references. You need to sort of ask who's trustworthy, who knows what they're talking about, who has truly done this successfully, and can they describe for you projects in your industry that they helped design. They know how they were put together. They know sort of the nature of the data that was needed for the model. They know the outputs and how they were used by the organization. You have someone like that, then you're ready.
Right.
And what we love to do is kind of a joint brainstorming session, where we bring some things to the table, our consultant really from their industry, what they've seen and what they know. But there are a lot of fantastic ideas locked up in people's minds at an organization. Frankly, better ideas we find, and I hate to say that, but they live it and breathe it every day, right? So they know the challenges, they know the kinds of things that they spend a ton of time on that frustrates them, that they wish, man, if I had an easy button that had a machine that popped out this answer, man, I would love to push that button. They know those kinds of things. Then it becomes an exercise in determining the feasibility. Frankly, a lot of it is data. And I say that word 1,000 times a day, data, 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 because it is the food for AI. And without it, without quality data, without sufficient quantities of data for these training models, you either can do nothing, or even worse than that, maybe you run the risk of a model that you put together putting out false positives and false negatives. And there's nothing worse, because you talk about killing credibility. People are excited. Hey, we got this AI model, whatever, it's going to recommend new prospective customers that our sales team can call on. Something very exciting and very impactful. And if it spits out a bunch of names that just looking at it, they're not going to do business with us.
Right.
This is completely wrong, or it doesn't even have to be completely wrong, honestly. If it's adulterated enough with false positives and false negatives,
Yeah.
they look at the list and say, I mean, one out of every 3 or 4 calls that I make are going to be wasted time. I'm not using this. So that's a real risk. And so the feasibility question of, can you really get to something that's at least first draft quality with a human in the loop? Would it add value as such? That's important. And you can imagine, as I'm describing all of this, asking your IT person, they could be incredibly smart. A lot of them are incredibly smart. If they haven't done AI and they don't know the landscape of the tools, the data requirements to go into a model, etc., it's really an unfair question to ask them. So you need a specialist, I guess, is the short answer to this question, and particularly someone who can think strategically with you about not just technical feasibility and possibilities, but business impact. If we build this model, how could we use it? What sort of efficiencies does it deliver? Is there a possibility it even delivers revenue? We have helped companies create data and analytics products that then are sold or upsold to their existing customers or to brand new customer bases out there. Um, Understanding that landscape is really key when you try to calculate ROI on these investments.
Yeah, what's really interesting, something I want to underscore, and then I'll let you run here. And I appreciate your time. So one thing I've noticed as well, to the point that you actually made, was that if you don't hire the practitioner, a lot of companies are going to try to kind of go the cheap route. They're going to leverage their internal resources, and I'm hearing more horror stories and more calls that are in regards to, we have a mess. Now we need to parachute somebody in to kind of untangle
100%.
created, versus maybe just having a conversation with, an Innovation Vista or yourself, sitting down in a boardroom and just talking. But seeing a
Yeah.
lot of that, where Joe in the boiler room was tasked with creating a AI application, and it's a complete disaster.
Yeah.
So
Well, he's used ChatGPT, right? And he came and talked to the CEO and said, "Hey, look, I used it to create my itinerary for my trip to New England or whatever. Like I can do this." And yeah, you're so right about that. And I appreciate you saying that. Our services start at $1,000 a week, right? I mean, this is not like $1 million investment. A lot of people are very scared that this is big dollars. You can get advisory help from us for $1,000 a week. And depending on, do you want us to lead it? Do you want us to just sort of give you some ideas and go away? Do you want, some sort of hybrid of that? But this is not a tremendous amount of money that's required to get the help you need. That's why we say you get 100% of our expertise for a fraction of the cost.
I love it. I think that's a great segue to the last question. Where can people find you?
So our website is innovationvista.com. And there's a contact us page there. We reply to every legitimate question. We get plenty of spam input, but if it doesn't have to lead to an engagement for us or some invoice that we're going to send you. We love talking about this stuff, so we do get questions sometimes. Hey, any suggestions for XYZ? And we reply to that and we give those answers and suggestions. And we look at it as paying it forward a little bit, right? Like it put a little good out there and it will eventually make its way back.
Agree.
I'm also very active on LinkedIn and post a lot of articles, try to add some value to that community with lessons learned and suggestions and things that will help people. And so I do a lot of messaging one-on-one on that platform as well.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, your passion shines through. Greatly appreciate your time, and man, I'm really excited to see what happens in the next 1, 3, 5 years.
Likewise. No, I enjoy this. This is my favorite topic. So happy to talk. And Beau, I certainly appreciate the invitation today.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.